We now it's now time for giving the Bernard M. Gordon Prize for Innovation in Engineering Technology Education recipient lecture. The prize, endowed by a generous gift from the Gordon Foundation, is named in honor of NAE member Bernard M. Gordon, former chair of Neurologica Corporation. Now, this award recognizes innovative education modalities in current design, teaching methods, and technology-enabled learning that strengthens students' capabilities and inspires them to become engineering leaders. The $500,000 prize is shared equally by the recipients and their university to support the continued development of the award-winning program. In January of this year, the NAE awarded the 13th Gordon Prize to Worcester Polytechnic Institute educators, NAE member Duran Appelian, Arthur M. Heinricher, Richard F. Vaz, and Kristen K. Wobe for a project-based engineering curriculum developing leadership, innovative problem-solving, interdisciplinary collaboration, and global competencies. The project-based engineering curriculum at WPI prepares 21st century leaders to tackle global issues through interdisciplinary collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. The Institute's engineering program engages students with a specially designed educational sequence in which first-year students complete projects on topics such as energy and water, second-year capstone focus on humanities and arts, junior year interdisciplinary projects related to technology and society, relates technology to society, and senior year design projects are completed in conjunction with external sponsors to provide relevant engineering experiences upon graduation. Last year, WPI launched its Institute on Project-Based Learning, an initiative to help other colleges and universities implement project-based learning on their campuses. This year's Gordon Prize winners have each played a critical role in establishing the program and ensuring that it continues to produce well-rounded engineering leaders who will solve our world's grand challenges. They are all here with us today, and I asked Dr. Vaz to come to the podium and present the Gordon Prize lecture, after which we'll have 10 minutes opportunity for audience questions. So with that, I ask Dr. Vaz to come forward. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moat. On behalf of my colleagues, Duran Appelian, Art Heinricher, Chris Wobe, we would like to thank you for this amazing honor and the great opportunity to tell you a little bit about our program. I'm going to be describing a curriculum that helps students develop the skills and abilities that we believe are needed for the 21st century success in engineering by engaging them in real-world project work across all 4 years of the curriculum, both in and out of the major. But before I do that, I would like to ask you to take a step back with me for a moment.
No matter how many years a man puts into building things like these, he never gets tired of looking at them again. Not if he's an engineer. Theory and practice, headwork and handwork, those make the engineer. And at Worcester Tech, class is small enough so that a man can really work with his teachers. No mass production of education here, not a bit of it. Sure, it's a man-sized schedule, but how else is he going to learn a man-sized job? Bridge the future. Beyond that bridge lay the world.
So, that was a recruitment video from the 1950s, and the full video is 20 minutes long. I decided to spare you the other 19 minutes. But I think that some of you might recognize the world that it depicts. In the 1950s and the 1960s, students at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, as with most engineering curricula around the country, were in a rather lockstep curriculum, marching from required course to required course, with almost no opportunity for making choices or broadening their experience. And the faculty were locked in too, with very little opportunity for innovation. This is a black and white photo, but I like to imagine those notes are yellow. Occasionally, there would be an exciting new technology that would work its way into the classroom to spice things up. But like many places in the 1960s, WPI was firmly rooted with its feet in the history of engineering education. But there was a lot going on in the 1960s. It was a time of discovery. Man set foot on the moon, the first heart transplant. And it was also a time of social revolution and foment. There were concerns, of course, about the United States' involvement in Southeast Asia, the civil rights movement. The first Earth Day took place. And amid all of this was the growing sense in American society that technology and science may be getting ahead of mankind's ability to use them wisely. And some of this change was felt back on the WPI campus as well, where a group of idealistic young faculty met first over lunches and beers, and then in committees to try to envision an entirely new approach to engineering education that would emphasize social responsibility and the ability to apply knowledge to useful purposes. And so this group of faculty developed a vision which was proposed to the faculty and approved in December of 1969. And an excerpt reads that the WPI student should demonstrate that they were all he's back then, can learn on his own, can translate learning into worthwhile action, and is thoroughly aware of the interrelationships among basic knowledge, technological advance, and human need. This goal statement went on to say that a WPI education should develop a strong degree of self-confidence, an awareness of the community beyond himself, and an intellectual restlessness that spurs him to continued learning. I think you can tell from these words that this was a distinctly new vision for technological education. And one of the phrases that was used on the campuses at that time was the technological humanist, the idea of trying to develop a curriculum that would prepare engineers who thought deeply about the social and cultural consequences and implications of their work. And this ideal was translated into a curriculum that was brought to a vote in May 1970. The curriculum required a 2/3 margin to pass, and it passed by exactly the margin of one vote. And by that margin of one vote, all required courses and all prerequisites were eliminated to be replaced by a series of degree-required projects in which students would demonstrate their ability to apply knowledge to real-world problems. Traditional grades and class rankings were abolished in favor of a system that encouraged cooperation and risk-taking. Even semesters were wiped out, replaced by 7-week terms that would allow students to engage in full-time immersion in project work, both on the campus and off the campus. Now, you're probably wondering if we're being recognized here today for something that happened 46 years ago. And I'm pleased to say that that's not entirely the case. We've been able to make a few augmentations to this program. There are a few required courses in some of our majors now, although students have far more choice than at any other university at which I'm aware. We still have a non-punitive grading system that rewards cooperation, although our students now do have some A's and B's and C's that appear on their transcripts. But we've still got a series of required projects, and they've been augmented in some interesting ways. So I'd like to describe to you a little bit about the WPI vision for education as it exists today. At the heart of the WPI plan, as we call it, has been a balance between the major in general education, as well as a permeability of the border between the two of them. Our students complete 54 credit hours minimum of general education. About 15 years ago, when the National Survey of Student Engagement began to report on the level of engagement of college freshmen and college seniors around the country, the WPI faculty had to confront something that we'd known about for a long time, which was the fact that although our seniors were among the most highly engaged students in the nation, our freshmen were not engaged. They weren't experiencing the project-based education that they had come to WPI to experience. And so in the last 10 years, we've developed and have been growing something that we call the Great Problem Seminar. And the Great Problem Seminar is a 6-credit-hour experience that our students take in their first semester on the campus, in which they choose a seminar that is organized around one of the grand challenges, one of the great problems of the world. There's a seminar related to water, one to energy, one to sustainable cities, one to sustainable food systems, and so forth. Each one of these seminars is co-taught in close collaboration by a faculty member from engineering or science with a faculty member from the humanities or the social sciences. During the first half of the semester, the students examine that great problem, that grand challenge, from a number of different disciplinary perspectives, considering the scientific, technological, humanistic, social, and cultural aspects of that problem. During the second half, the students are put into small teams where they choose a particular instance of that challenge, and they undertake a project to try to propose some solution to that challenge. For example, students who have worked in the energy area were given the challenge of working with a collaborative of urban farmers in our home city of Worcester, Massachusetts. And these farmers had a greenhouse that they were unable to use during the winter because they couldn't afford to heat it. The students did a thorough study and were able to determine that a biogas digester could be the solution to the problem and would be a viable way to heat the greenhouse during the winter. Another group that was looking at public health problems took on the challenge of Uganda, where there are over 20,000 people, 20,000 amputees with transtibial need for prosthetics and who can't afford that prosthetic fixture. And the students were able to determine a method of 3D printing for the socket that would provide the prosthetic solution so that these Ugandans could join the workforce. In the second year, our students complete their studies typically in the humanities and arts. And while, of course, it is universal that students in engineering will study the humanities and arts, the approach that WPI takes is rather unusual. Our students are required to choose a particular area in which they are going to focus. And all of our students must complete 18 credit hours, or 6 courses, in the humanities and arts, in which they choose a particular area in which to go into great depth, culminating in a 3-credit-hour project where they work closely with a faculty member on something creative. So students who are interested in music, for example, may compose and perform an original piece of music. Students who are interested in philosophy or history will choose a research question to explore in depth with a faculty member and write a research paper on the topic. In the third year, WPI students complete a required project, which is perhaps the most distinctive and unusual element of WPI's curriculum, something that we call the Interactive Qualifying Project. The idea behind this project is for students to explore an issue at the intersection between technology and society by addressing a real-world problem typically posed by an external agency or organization. These projects are 9 credit hours. They are advised by 1 or more faculty members, typically faculty members from different disciplines, not necessarily related to the student's major, and the student teams come from all of the different majors across the campus. In our home city of Worcester, for example, we work with many different NGOs, and a team recently worked with AIDS Project Worcester on a problem to address nutritional needs of the clients of AIDS Project Worcester, typically low-income people who live in a food desert. They were able to determine that the community had access to a brownfields which would be a viable site for a community garden with the appropriate technology, and the students developed the plans for a community garden that would be maintained by the clients of AIDS Project Worcester and would provide the foods that were culturally appropriate to them, and that I'm pleased to say that that garden now exists, and I just had breakfast a couple of weeks ago across the street from it. A little bit further away from home, we had students travel to Namibia, where they were working in the informal settlements. One of the challenges in the many challenges in the informal settlements of Namibia is that the housing is very often corrugated metal, very hot in the summer, very cold in the winter. And another challenge in these communities, of course, is that there are many young men who don't have work, and there's a need for economic development that will engage them. The students were able to determine an approach to using low-cost, locally available materials that could serve as insulation for the homes, and were able to work with an organization called Men on the Side of the Road to help develop a startup business so that young Namibian men would be able to provide the service of installing this insulation in the homes of the informal settlements. In the fourth year, our students complete a second 9-credit-hour required project. And this one is in the major, and it's called the Major Qualifying Project. And this is a project in which students tackle the type of challenge that will prepare them for whatever's coming next after the bachelor's degree. Our science students are typically doing research in collaboration with a faculty research laboratory, but our engineers, as you might guess, are very often doing design. We recently had a group of robotics students who designed an autonomous boat that would be able to respond swiftly to man-overboard situations on vessels. And as you'll be hearing in a few minutes, we recently had a group of 3 female civil and environmental engineering students work on the environmental impact assessment for the expansion of the Panama Canal project in Panama. So this is the project. One more thing. I'll show you a little diagram here that is intended to symbolize the fact that our students actually do take courses as well. And throughout many, if not most of those courses, project work is scattered. I'm an electrical engineer, and one of my favorite courses to teach has always been our sophomore level design course. And long before LED lights were available in Costco, when it was an emerging technology, my students worked with an organization called Light Up the World that was trying to figure out how to use LED technology in key applications in the developing world. And we also partnered with an organization out of MIT called the Design That Matters. And my students were given the challenge of designing an LED driver that would be sufficiently low cost and sufficiently efficient to be used in a projector that would facilitate literacy training for women in Mali, which has to take place at night because they spend their days typically carrying water. So this is the curriculum that we have today. We call it the WPI plan. And as you can tell from this diagram, we try to encourage students to move across those boundaries as fluidly as possible. And I'd like to show you a brief video describing the experience of one of our recent graduates.
I knew right away that I wanted to do mechanical engineering because that was supposed to be my destiny, I felt. I was in the program and started to realize that I needed more art in my life. I realized that I needed to fuse art and engineering together. That's how I came to write my own major program. I wanted a more fulfilling WPI experience. When I first proposed my industrial design major program, I also had to propose a major qualifying project that was uniquely tailored to suit.
The real heart of the MQP was the design and perfecting of a architectural glass brick prototype with a solar collector.
I think that if there was a more versatile solar panel out there that was cheap and didn't have to go on your roof and could be used in different ways to build different things, then that could be a product that would take off.
He had invented something that seemed so smart and yet so commonsensical. But what impressed me more was that he didn't simply want to run with it as a technique, as an invention. He wanted to think about what it meant in the history of design.
I think it's important to not lose sight of the things that you're passionate about. It's also important to have diversity in your life and to bring new people and new mediums into it. The humanities and arts can do that.
So I think perhaps the biggest innovation that's happened in recent decades to our curriculum has been not a change in the curriculum, but a change in the delivery of the curriculum. At this point, over 75% of our students complete at least one of those required projects in a full-time 2-month immersion somewhere else in the world. In 1974, the faculty of WPI established our first off-campus project center here in Washington, D.C., with the intention that students would be able to work on technology policy issues. And to this day, we still have projects every year in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, the students will be arriving in just 2 weeks. But we also have 49 other project centers all around the world. We send cohorts of students with faculty members to work for local agencies and organizations, typically NGOs, nonprofits, and government agencies, on problems that the students will be able to tackle in 7 weeks and deliver some sort of recommendations and some sort of a solution. I'd like to share with you a few stories from in the words of our students and faculty of some of these projects and how they play out around the world.
The WPI motto is theory and practice. It's not theory then practice. The project work allows students to do that.
The project-based learning approach gives us a platform to develop the leadership mindset in our students. We do that by having them in situations where the problem is not well defined. So we teach them to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Dealing with a lot of group projects, you have to work with different personalities. I had a lot of conflict, and just resolving it was what made me a better person.
To be an effective leader, you do have to consider lots of different viewpoints on things. The project system at WPI really cultivates that sense of collaborating with different people across different fields.
Working in an interdisciplinary team really teaches you how to think outside of the box because you're working with people who are used to solving problems in very different ways.
I love working at WPI. I love what we do with our students, watching them come in as first-year students and seeing them leave prepared to take on the challenges that the world will present to them, and knowing that our curriculum and the way we've set it up has prepared them to take on those challenges.
With these real-world projects, there's no direct right or wrong answer, and it's such a more complex issue than we even think going into it. And I think part of the experience is that you learn so much more while you're there.
When you're given a problem in class, they have clear-cut solutions, so you can easily learn the different concepts. But when you're given a real-world problem, there are no clear-cut solutions, so you have a lot of different factors to deal with.
One of the things that I've learned from my project experience is that you're working with sponsors on a real-world problem, and you're working on problems that really affect communities. These projects really set you up for success in the future because it really prepares you for working in the real world.
WPI's Global Projects program is notable because it has been scalable and sustainable over many years. I think the most important element of it, however, is the educational impact that the authentic learning has on the students.
I was the first group to go to Paraguay. We didn't speak Spanish, and at the end we came out knowing Spanish on an intermediate level and having a really successful project that had an impact on the local community.
When I went abroad for my junior year project, I went over to Worcester, England and worked in the project center there. And we did a small energy survey in a little neighborhood within this Worcester, England. And I found that working with staff and professors in a different culture, in a different country even, gave me a new perspective on everything that I'd thought of for sustainability and really educated me in ways that I hadn't thought previously possible.
WPI just doesn't help students have impact. We require that students have impact. And I believe it deep in my soul that we do this every day with every one of our students.
My experience in Morocco was developing a greywater recycling system so we could maximize the water use in a Moroccan village. The interviews that we had with the Moroccan people there, it was very rewarding, and it made me feel good about myself, about my project. My experience there has inspired me to go into the Peace Corps after I graduate. I know I will have an impact there regardless of where I'm placed.
For my senior year project, I'm going to design assisted devices for the people with disabilities to make their life easier. That's always something I want to do, and impacting the world and make the world a better place.
My senior year project, I completed it in Panama City, Panama, working on the Panama Canal. Working at the Panama Canal is really unique to have on your resume. To have that experience working for such a large organization really set me up for the future. I've always wanted to work for a global company. I ended up accepting a job offer from an international company.
With 45 years of experience in project-based learning, WPI is uniquely positioned to make a big impact on higher education. Project-based learning requires a cultural shift for institutions and for faculty. We found that working with teams of faculty from other colleges and universities, we can help give them some of the models and tools and techniques that can help them begin to get more comfortable with this new paradigm of teaching and learning. The Gordon Prize is a great honor for WPI, but it's also a great opportunity. Helping higher education change for the better to improve learning outcomes for students is the most noble cause that WPI could undertake. Thank you. So it's worth noting that all of this is happening at a research university. And less than 2 weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal came out with a different type of college ranking. It was very interesting. This was a college ranking that sought to balance which college faculties were simultaneously excellent at both teaching and research. Teaching as measured by students' ratings of the accessibility and level of engagement of the curriculum, and research as measured by faculty productivity in publications. Rather pleased that WPI came out on top. I'm not a big fan of college rankings, but I like to think that this ranking may be a step in the right direction. Of course, college rankings are nice, but outcomes are more important. And I'd like to tell you about a few of the outcomes that we're aware of. Our students are doing amazing things in the world, both in expected ways and unexpected ways. The young man in the center of the screen is Naveen Salvadore, who graduated about a dozen years ago and is one of the co-founders of Foursquare. Up in the top right, you can see our alumna Gail Baker, who is a senior vice president at United Technologies and kicking butt in the male-centric world of aerospace engineering. But we're equally proud of some very non-traditional accomplishments of our graduates. In the bottom left is a former student of mine, Nina Simon. Nina is the director of the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History and one of the leading thinkers in the museum world today. And in the top left, you can see a photo of and by Donald Boyd, who graduated just 3 years ago with a degree in chemical engineering. But he also graduated with a burning desire to see and capture the world through his photographer's lens, which was born from his project experience in Namibia. Don founded an adventure photography company, which he now runs out of Iceland, and he's had several of his photographs published in the National Geographic. Now, anecdotes are great, but data helps too. And a few years ago, we decided to undertake an alumni study. At that point, we had over 20,000 alumni of the project-based WPI plan. And those 20,000 alumni had all completed an interactive qualifying project in the third year, a senior qualifying project in the fourth year in their major. And those alumni spread over 38 years, from the class of 1974 to the class of 2011. So we took about half of them in a stratified random sample, so about 10,000 alumni, and we hired an external evaluator to do a survey. We got a 25% response rate to that survey, so over 2,500 returns, and then we followed it up with some in-depth interviews. And I'd like to share some of the things that we learned from the survey of our alumni and from the interviews with the alumni. These were our fundamental research questions for the study. What are the long-term impacts of that project work on the careers and the lives of our students. In what ways do projects prepare alumni for their careers and their lives? And how do different groups experience those impacts? One area of impact that we looked in were professional impacts. 89% of the alumni who returned the survey told us that doing those two projects helped them later in their careers and lives take responsibility for their own learning. Similarly, 88% said the projects had helped them with problem solving, and similarly, high percentages reported that those projects had helped prepare them for effective teamwork, written communication, and effective leadership in the workplace. This resonated with us because we had a lot of information that our alumni had been unusually successful. They show up in the pay scale surveys in the top 10 or 15 colleges in the country, but this was the first time we were really able to have some sort of causal connection with the project-based curriculum. We also asked our alumni about personal impacts. 87% of the alumni reported that their project work had helped them develop a stronger personal character. And when asked about this surprising finding in the interviews, alumni reported how being asked to do something that mattered to someone else and taking on that challenge not for a grade, but for an intrinsic motivation, was the key to that character development. Similarly, you can see our alumni reported confidence in their ideas, being able to take on multiple perspectives, feelings of self-efficacy. A finding that was not terribly surprising to us is that alumni who had completed an off-campus project reported more positive benefits than other alumni in 33 of 39 areas. This was especially true in the areas of interpersonal skills and communication skills, and this was consistent with years of data that we had on campus from assessment showing the high level of achievement that our students have when they complete projects off campus. And a really exciting finding, I think, for the engineering community, women reported more positive benefits than men from project-based learning in 36 of 39 areas. And this is consistent with research which shows that women are more highly motivated than men by collaborative work and by work that has the capacity to help other people. And finally, in all 24 areas of professional skill development, engineering alumni reported more positive benefits than other alumni, most of whom are scientists, in professional growth. And I believe that this is tied to the fundamentally project-based nature of the engineering profession. We learned a lot from this study. Alumni told us repeatedly that the authentic nature of the project work was what they found so motivational and so inspiring. They told us that the adversity and unpredictability that real-world projects present, as much as they didn't like it at the time, promoted later in their careers and lives learning and growth and confidence, in that they viewed the projects as a safe environment in which to develop professional skills because of the close involvement of their faculty advisors. And so we have begun taking what we've learned as a university and trying to help other colleges and universities. 2 years ago, we partnered with the Association of American Colleges and Universities to offer the first Institute on Project-Based Learning in the summer of 2015. And then again last year, we did it. In these two institutes, we've had over 40 teams of faculty come to WPI to engage in an intensive 2.5-day workshop in which they develop a campus action plan to address a goal which they have arrived on our campus ready to work at. As this quote suggests, we've also begun augmenting this with custom workshops which we deliver on other campuses to help colleges and universities impact more of their faculty in project-based learning. And we're very pleased to say that we're going to be using part of the proceeds of the Gordon Prize to provide $5,000 subsidies for teams of engineering faculty toward the 27 Institute on Project-Based Learning, which will take place on the WPI campus in June of 2017. And that some of those teams, which are judged to have developed the best action plans will be eligible for $5,000 project-based learning development awards. Now, isn't that a nice-looking group of young people? They showed up on our campus in August. Do you know who they are? They're the class of 2020. And so that means about 60% of them are the engineers of 2020. And of course, it was only 12 years ago that the National Academy came out with its landmark study, The Engineer of 2020, followed up by Educating the Engineer of 2020, and called for some major changes in engineering education to produce graduates who are broadly educated, see themselves as global citizens, can be leaders, ethically grounded, who excel in teamwork and communication, ethical reasoning, understand the social and global context of their work, can work across disciplinary borders, and are able to benefit from the flexibility inherent in outcomes-based accreditation. So I think it's time for us to all look around the engineering classrooms that are near us and ask, do they look like this? They look like this? Is this how your students are spending their time? Because it's not that much different from this. And if we're going to be creating the engineers of 2020, I think we need to move from this vision to something like this. In the last 46 years, we've graduated 23,000 alumni from the WPI plan, and those alumni have completed over 18,000 projects in 55 different locations. Those projects have had impact on communities and organizations, but maybe most importantly, they've had impact on those 23,000 alumni. I'd like to thank the National Academy of Engineering for this honor and this opportunity to tell our story. And I'd like to thank Bernie Gordon for his leadership and support of innovation in engineering education. And I'd like to thank all of you for your attention today.